Hello and welcome to this brand new Blender Smoothie tutorial. My name is Ben Amond, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to create this delicious looking pizza in Blender. This is going to be a multi-part tutorial series just because there are a couple things to cover that are probably going to take a really long time to get through if we tried to do it all in one part. So I'm going to divide it up into hopefully 3 sections. Where this part will cover the texturing or the preparation of the textures. Then the next part will cover texturing and texture painting, and then the final part will cover shading, lighting, and rendering. Might have to make it 4 parts, but I hope I can keep it in 3. So the first thing we're going to want to do is, of course, take some photos of a pizza. Now, I'm not going to go into how to do this specifically in this video, but basically I have a couple textures that I've prepared, or not textures, but photos that I've taken that I'm going to turn into textures in this video. And there's really only one thing that you have to keep in mind when you're taking photos of food, and actually I guess 2. The first thing is you want to minimize the amount of shadows in the photo. So in some of the photos that I took, I had sort of something to bounce light off to sort of fill in the shadows on one side and kind of even out the shading. And then the other thing you want to do is, especially when you're working with greasy food like a pizza, especially a frozen pizza from Kroger or something like that, then you want to make sure that you reduce the amount of specular highlights. There are always going to be some that are still a little visible on it, but you want to kind of try to reduce that in advance. So maybe use something to sort of dab up parts of the grease on top and everything to kind of diffuse that reflectivity a little bit. So, like I said, I've taken a few photos, and I'm going to put these in on my site, which I have a link to in the description of this video if you're watching on YouTube. Of course, you're free to take your own photos, but if you'd rather just grab those for convenience sake. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start piecing some of the textures together. And before I open this up, I'm going to let you know that, of course, GIMP can be used for this. But just so I don't scare any of you people who only use open source software because you can't afford Photoshop or something like that, I will be using Photoshop for this. So, like I said, all of this can be done in GIMP. All we're going to be using is the clone stamp tool, essentially. That's pretty much it. So, it's really easy. Basically, if I can just open these up here, take a quick look at them. Scroll down and find them in here. I have a couple different textures here. I have some crust textures going on along here. You can see I took 4 different photos from different angles. We got a picture of the top, and then 2 pieces of pepperoni. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to be stitching together these crust photos, because basically we want to make it one continuous piece of crust, like one really big breadstick that we're going to UV map onto our pizza mesh. So let's get started with that first. The first thing we want to do is we want to create a new image in Photoshop or GIMP or whatever you're using that's big enough that we can paste all of these 4 textures into it at once. So I'm going to take a look at the properties. All these images are the same size, by the way. So if I can just look at the details over here, we see that it's 2000 by 1336 pixels. So we're going to make the image 1336 pixels tall because this is the width by the height. And then we're going to have to multiply 2,000 by 4, which is just 8,000, so that basically we can paste all of these images onto it without there being any overlap. Now, there will be overlap when we combine them, but just to make it a little more convenient when we're first adding them. So, come into here. Oh, looks like it's kind of cut off on the top there. But basically, I'm going up to File, clicking New. And, like I said, we want the width to be 8,000. And the height to be 1336, I believe it was. So we can go ahead and click OK. Okay, looks like we've got some weird grid lines there. Let me see if I can get rid of those really quickly. Hide that. Okay. So yeah, like I said, basically we can close out of that. All we want to do is kind of, let's see here. We've got to open these in something. Yeah, I'll just open them in Google Chrome. Why not? I just want to open them there, and you can see one of the things that I was using to reflect some of the light back onto the shadowed side of the pizza. But we just want to copy this and Control-V, paste it in Photoshop. I'm going to grab this tool just to move it over. Yeah, and it sort of locks into place a bit. And slide it right over there. Okay. And I think it automatically, it looks like it automatically created a new layer for it in this case. If you're using a different program, make sure that when you're pasting these images, it is creating a new layer for them, because you don't want them all in the same layer. Otherwise, you can't really manipulate them and erase parts of them without erasing other parts of the other images, and it gets really hectic. And you just want to make sure they're all in separate layers. So we can go ahead and open the second one, and just keep doing this, copying them and pasting them. Open that again. Just one more after this. Yeah, and you can see it is creating new layers for each of these. You can see that over here. And the last one, copy that, paste it. Okay. Oh, that's weird. Looks like there's a little bit of, okay. Yeah, there's a little bit of white on the edge right there. I don't know if you can see that in the video, but anyway. So the next thing we want to do is we basically want to start with the bottom and work our way up. So obviously we can't really do anything with layer 1. There's no other image we can overlap with layer 1. So we'll start with layer 2, and I'm going to zoom in here so I can kind of see this a little better. But basically I'm just going to, remember I have the second layer selected, move this over, and I'm going to sort of lower the opacity. I'm fairly certain GIMP has this, because I used GIMP a while before I used Photoshop, before I could afford Photoshop. So we just want to basically sort of lay them on top of each other like that. And you do want a little bit of overlap, at least with these, because you'll notice that we've got a bit of depth of field going on there, kind of a little blurriness in the background there, and we want to eliminate that so that this is all pretty sharp. So we're just going to hover over that, maybe something like that. And then bring the opacity all the way back up to 100%. Now, this is very important, especially here, to make sure you have this layer selected, because we're going to be erasing some of this. I want to turn the hardness all the way down to 0, so make sure you're using kind of a soft brush. I guess it doesn't really matter in the end, because we're going to be using the clone stamp, but it is a little easier to work with this way. And we just want to erase... Oh, that's weird. Why is it... Alright, maybe I can load a... Let's see. Let's load the basic brushes. Alright, this is really weird. Looks like they're all really hard. Oh, I'm using the pencil. That would explain it. Make sure you're using the brush preset of the eraser, and that would probably help. Okay, there we go. Let me go ahead and expand that size a little bit. There we go. That's better. Alright, and we just want to erase pretty much as close as we can get, maybe something like that, so that they sort of overlap. And then of course we're going to be fixing a lot of this up later with the clone stamp tool, and the rest of this image, it doesn't really matter, you can just kind of go about doing that. And we're going to do this with all the rest of the ones before coming back and fixing them up with the clone stamp tool, just so we can hurry this up a bit. Go ahead and take this next layer. Going to move this over. If you're having a little difficulty getting trying to get the right lighting, then maybe basically I had like my dad sort of hold a couple things to help with that, since only one person can really, there's only so much one person can do. And we want to kind of going to lower this a little bit, even though it's not aligned with the top, just so it's aligned with the rest of the crust pieces a little bit better. Something like that. Okay. And then you want to go in, again, with the eraser tool. Again, make sure you have that right layer selected. Otherwise, you're going to be erasing parts of other layers, and you don't want that. So we'll kind of erase all this, a little bit of that. That looks pretty good. Not really, but it will later. Alright. And then the final layer. Come all the way over here, click, whoa, undo that. Yeah, make sure you have the right layer selected. I keep telling you that like you're probably going to mess it up, and I keep messing it up anyway. Okay, lower the opacity again, just so we can get a good level of viewing there. That'll work. Turn that all the way back up. And finally we'll finish, oh, whoops, not the clone stamp tool, the eraser tool. Finish this up. Alright. And it doesn't really matter what like the upper parts of the pizza look like what the back of this is like, because it's not really going to matter. We have a separate texture for that. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much it. Now that they're all on one layer and they've all been erased and combined and whatnot, what we want to do is we want to merge these all into one layer, just because you run into some problems if you're trying to use the clone stamp tool with multiple layers. So with the top layer selected, I'm just going to go up to layer. Again, you can't see it. Should adjust the dimensions next time. But go up to layer, and there should be an option or something like it if you're using another program called merge down. Maybe there's an option to merge all the layers or merge visible. Is what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to combine all those into one layer. Hang on, let me check something. It looked like... No, it didn't. Okay, yeah. Layer, merge visible. And if you choose like the merge down option, then it'll just merge that layer with the layer underneath it, and you can keep doing that until all of them are merged. So, we'll go into the clone stamp tool now, and it's way too tiny. I'm going to bring the size of that up. You don't have to be super precise about this. It's actually pretty easy to get it looking pretty good. Make sure you're using a soft brush. Some people would say to use a hard brush just because there are parts of like the burnt cheese over on the edges that might not look so good with a soft brush, but it's a lot harder to work with a hard brush, and it's generally a lot more efficient just to use a softer brush. So I'm going to zoom in here. Yeah, maybe that's a little too close. Zoom out a little more. Yeah, and then we'll start kind of working with this. And again, if you're using Photoshop, to use this tool, you just hold down Alt and click on a certain area, and then you can start sort of painting over the rest of this. And the first thing we want to do is to sort of, as you can see, we've got these weird sort of, I don't know, shapes in the bottom there where it's sort of lifting up and then coming back down, even on like the parts where we didn't merge the textures. So we want to fix those first, and then we want to go in and eliminate some of the repeating patterns. Like you can see here, we've got this little shape and this little shape. You probably can't see because this thing is really, really thin, but that's the next thing we'll want to take care of. So right now, let's just keep sort of working with this. Maybe go over and kind of do the same thing to this, again, even though it's not really part of the texture that we're merging. And we'll keep working with this. Maybe take some parts from other parts of the pizza there, just to kind of combine those. And keep working at that a little bit more. It's looking a little better. Alright. That's really all the work you need to do on merging them. At this point, what we need to work on is, like I said, sort of refining that and fixing some of these repeating patterns. So, like, I'm just going to take something from maybe over here, paint it right on there. The key to fixing these repeating patterns is to basically take a portion of the image that's totally really, really far away from the part of the image that you're working on, so that your eyes don't really pick up on that repeating pattern since they're so far apart. I think that'll work all in there. Might want to kind of fix some of that up a little bit more. And it's just really go in and sort of tweak it until you think it looks good. Maybe that's really bright in there. Wow. Okay. Maybe something like that. Alright. I'll keep going over. Oh, got another repeating pattern right here. Just got to keep an eye out for those. Maybe grab something over there and kind of use that. Alright, this looks really bad. That's another thing you want to avoid is you can see parts of it that are really, really bright right here and then kind of shadowy here. You want to fix those. Kind of get a little bit of both colors in there just to kind of even things out a bit more. Maybe take that and position that like that. Something like that. It's a little better. It still looks really weird. I want to fix that part down there. Yeah, so already we're kind of getting into some of the weird patchy looking stuff, which is something that you generally want to avoid. So sometimes it helps to use like maybe a slightly lower opacity level or something, just to kind of add a little more gradual blending to it. And honestly, that's probably good enough. We didn't really spend very much time on it, and it does look kind of weird all spread out like this, but once we UV map it, it actually does look a lot better. especially when we add the shader and everything. So that's pretty good. I'm going to zoom out then, and we can start working on combining this with our other textures, because it is most convenient to work. I forgot I can just double click the hand there. To work with textures when they're all in one image, especially. So I'm going to crop this really quickly. It's something you might want to do too, because yeah, especially if you're using your video card to render. Yeah, if you have really high resolution textures, too many of them, yeah, it can look pretty bad sometimes. Oops. Sometimes the render will crash, and yeah, it's not pleasant. Alright. Don't want to crop it too close though, because when we go in with texture painting and whatnot, we're going to be painting over the edges a tiny bit, so you want to leave a little room around for that. And that's good enough. So we can go ahead and save this. Again, I'm going up to File, Save. We want to go to this texture folder again, and we'll go ahead and name this, we'll just name it Crust Texture. Go ahead and save that. Okay, and you want to use the smallest compression generally. I've actually never experimented with other compression methods with PNG. I kind of thought it was a lossless format. So basically the next thing that we want to do, like I said, is we want to combine all these images, or this image, with the other images. You know, the image that I took from the top and then the pieces of pepperoni. So again, we want to, in this case, I'm not going to bother sort of finding the measurements of all these images and piecing them together. I'm just going to create a new, really, really big image. So I'm just going to do like 5,000 by, I don't know, maybe we'll do a width of like 7,500 by 5,000. Something like that. Click OK. We can close this, by the way. And then we just want to come in here, kind of open this crust texture. We can close all those other ones. We want to copy that, paste it right in here, kind of position it, I don't know, somewhere like that, just out of the way. Then we want to open this one, go ahead and copy that, paste that, position that there too. And finally, these little pepperoni pieces. Find those and paste those. Alright, we should be able to close out of that completely. Okay, so yeah, basically all we did was just copied all these images and pasted them into one, and now we're going to crop it really quickly. That's not the crop tool. There's the crop tool. Okay. And now this, you can crop it pretty closely, at least if you're using my textures or textures like mine, because there's plenty of space that we already set aside in these specific images for texture painting and whatnot. So we just want something like that. Go ahead and hit enter. And that's pretty good. So I think we can go ahead and save that. So I'm just going to go ahead and name it. I don't think we have to save a Photoshop version of this because we still have the separate images. So we can go ahead and switch that to a PNG. And we'll just go ahead and name it something like, I don't know, Final Pizza Texture. That'll probably work. Alright, and now it's still saving there. That's pretty much it for preparing the textures. So, I think we're only, I don't know how far I'm into this, maybe, yeah, about 18 minutes. I think we can create a rudimentary pizza mesh before we wrap this tutorial up, just so we can cover a bit more ground in this before we move on to another part. So I'm just going to open up Blender. Already got it open here. And basically we just want to create a really simple pizza mesh. Maybe use some displacement in there, maybe some image-based displacement. That would be really nice. But maybe we won't get into that until the next part. So I'm just going to start by deleting this cube. And we'll delete the lamp too, because we're going to be adding our own lights later on. Oops. And I'm just going to add a circle. And in this circle, I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm going to press E to extrude and kind of scale that in. Scale that in a couple times. Extrude, scale it in, extrude, scale it in. We'll merge that at the center. Might want one more edge loop there, so let's press Control R to add another one. And then we want to sort of extrude this down too. Maybe give that an extra edge loop in the middle, then extrude that in. And that can probably do with one less edge loop. So we just want something like that. Okay, that's kind of weird. It's like going into perspective view when I switch. It's kind of strange. Okay, I don't know. This is the newest version of Blender. You can tell by the tabs and everything. So from here, we just want to kind of shape it. Now, basically, the way a pizza is typically shaped is the crust sort of rises on the outside and then it kind of sinks in the middle, so that's what we're going to try to do here. Now, let me just sort of select this middle edge loop first of all and kind of scale that out a bit. This perspective view is really getting on my nerves. And it's happening every time I switch, too. It's really weird. Alright, but I'm just going to scale that out a little bit. And I'm going to actually... I just held down Alt and right-clicked that to select the whole thing, by the way. And I'm going to scale that out all the way out to here. Maybe bring that up a little bit, and I am going to need another edge loop, so Control-R to add another one, maybe scale that out. And I'm just going to select center portion, kind of drop that down, something like that. Just so it's sort of caved in there. And maybe flatten that out a little more. It's generally pretty flat in the middle from what I can tell. So that's pretty good. It's a good size too, I think. We'll probably end up tweaking this, well, we will end up tweaking it most likely a lot later. I'm just going to set the shading to smooth, and I'm going to give it a subsurf modifier really quickly. We'll give it 2 levels to start with. I'm going to add, first of all, we need maybe a couple more edge loops. I'm going to go back into edit mode. Oops, caps lock, edit mode. And we want to add an edge loop sort of at the bottom there. Actually, might want to scale those out a little bit more that way. Yeah, just something a little bit more like that, because it's generally pretty flat on the bottom there too. And then kind of curves more towards the top. Maybe we'll add another edge loop right there too, because it's probably a good spot to add one. Yeah, something like that. Maybe I can even move that down a little bit more. It's pretty good. Okay, so I want to add a little bit of displacement really quickly before we wrap this up. So I'm going to add a displace modifier. I'm just going to add a new texture. We're probably going to have 2 displacement modifiers going on, another one based on the image textures. But for now, we'll just start with this basic thing. So I'm just going to go to maybe 0.2. Oh, that's way too much. 0.05. Might still be a little too much. 0.025. We'll start with something really subtle. That's good. Except that we've got these weird, kind of weird shapes going on in the middle there. I'm just going to subdivide those middle edges then and see if that kind of solves it. Especially maybe if I move that around a little bit. Yeah, that helped a little bit. They're still kind of there, but that's good enough for now. And then really quickly, the last thing we want to do is kind of turn on proportional editing, which is just O, and start selecting parts of these, kind of manipulating the mesh a little bit. Give it a little more deformity, because it's way too perfectly round. So we just want to kind of work with these parts here, just to give it a little bit more variety. Something like that will probably work. Most pizzas are generally pretty round, they're just slightly deformed. And that's probably good enough. So that concludes this tutorial, pretty much. And in the next tutorial, we're going to be focusing on unwrapping this and working on some of the texture painting behind that. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you learned something. And I look forward to seeing your results once the complete tutorial series is in. So thanks for watching.